Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul?
and Jolene. And today we're talking about...
Your son looks like you're looking at me, so I guess you're asking me. We're talking about wealth in RPGs.
I thought you said currency.
Currency, wealth, how it's handled in RPGs, in different RPGs, because every RPG handles it a bit differently. So the venerable old game of D&D deals in gold pieces.
Yes. Which is,
Pretty cool.
well, it's normal for us people, right? Because that's what we use to pay for stuff.
Gold pieces?
Only if we have them. Probably more like paper money.
I think
We used to.
D&D, well, D&D is probably like the standard of how RPGs deal with currency. They just throw stuff out there. This costs this much, and then don't really worry about how that used to match with their treasure tables. Because in original D&D, when we played that, it would have these treasure tables. It would have these costs of stuff like, I don't remember a cost list in original D&D, but they certainly had a cost table in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where they had how much a sword costs or this cost.
Well, when you make your character, they give you a certain amount of money to spend on your build, right? You spend points and you get money, like 50 gold pieces.
Well,
I don't think they give you 50 gold pieces. They give you money to buy your equipment, right?
Right. In the original, or not original, I always think about original D&D, but I didn't play original D&D very long because we got the Advanced Players book a bit after we started playing. And so I get a little bit, I kind of mesh original D&D and AD&D together into this.
I'm sure you do that with a
thing.
lot of things.
But I didn't play second edition, so I have a clear delineation between AD&D and third edition, which was, a good, I don't know how many years difference.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my microphone, getting it comfortable. So I think that the original D&D monetary system or gold standard
Standard
is probably a lot like what you would consider medieval kind of currency. Although mostly in medieval times, only rich people had currency, and they really didn't use it. You really traded in goods and services.
Right, barter system. Yes, and I think when we look at currency, and I think one thing we got to remember is that AD&D or D&D was looking at a fantastical medieval system, right?
Yes.
And fantastical as in it didn't exist. The idea of castles and dragons is in our history and in as far as writing is concerned. So that's where that comes from. But then when you try to make a role-playing game based on that idea, not really historical accuracy, what is it? You don't have to deal with reality. So you just throw out this monetary system. Okay, so when you're talking about D&D monetary system, I don't think Gary Gygax or David Arneson really thought about economically how it would impact the game, blah, blah, blah. Because when we were playing by the rules and had rolled on the tables for treasure, we had to get wagons to hold our stuff.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think because they came from wargaming, right?
Yeah.
So,
they definitely play war games.
I mean, when you're in the army or part of the empire or whatever, I meant Roman Empire when I say that, not Star Wars.
Okay, I was confused.
The army provides for you as you're going, so you don't have to worry too much about money. Although, if you get stuck in Gaul, then you might have to rouse the citizens to get your money and stuff.
Rouse the citizens. You're right, and I think it's funny because I just remember rolling into towns with these wagons full of magical stuff because the +1 sword just was a thing you didn't need, but nobody could buy it because nobody had enough money to buy it because it was worth 10,000 gold. But we had thousands upon thousands of gold pieces and silver pieces And
How did you carry all those thousands of gold pieces?
we had wagons.
I
and
find
then-
it interesting because you're very curmudgeonly, and I don't know if that's a real word.
Curmudgeonly?
You're very
Not a
an
curmudgeon.
old school kind of guy when it comes to the boys saying, I want to get this magic item, or I want to buy this, or they go to the table and they show you what it is.
Because of
And you're always going, well, you're like, it
it's
tears
painful.
a piece of your soul out to let them have that
yeah,
magic item.
because I have that mind of that reference in my history where I thought it was silly. Not silly, but it's silly to think of it now, but that I had the wagons. We all had a wagon of stuff.
You were
Me,
some
Sip,
very
and
slow
Esty.
adventurers.
Well, and then it was weird because, like, well, who's going to look after the wagon? So we had to have hirelings and stuff like that. And, like, hirelings just, all they will do is watch the horses and stuff. They're not going to protect anything. If anything comes by, they're just going to run away. Then we had to hire, like,
Guards.
guards, which were like henchmen. There's hirelings and henchmen, which are almost the same thing. But I think my brother had made a delineation between hirelings being people who aren't fighters, they would drive the wagon and they take care of the horses. Then there's the hirelings that are like hired mercenaries, but they're really low level. And if you're like 7th and 8th level and you're encountering stuff of that nature,
I can just imagine that really bothered Felipe, that you guys were driving around with carts.
he didn't see it. Well, it was then that happens, right? We would have this humongous list. There was a whole page of stuff we had, right? Because we just had it. We'd go, oh, okay, and we had this running tally of how much gold and silver we had. I don't think we even dealt in copper. Like, why do we even want to bother with copper? And then when we integrated into or shifted to AD&D, it was like I played a paladin, and a paladin cannot have more gold or riches more than he can carry on his person or on his horse. So
they adjusted it.
No, I don't know. I don't remember. But it was still very.
No, I mean they adjusted
the numbers,
the system, because they realized people were driving around with carts.
No, that was just a paladin had that strict rule because he was a warrior of God or something, or he was whatever. He was supposed to be like
spiritual in some way.
Well, no, I don't know. He had this oath of not being totally rich. So I devised an idea. I go, well, I can't carry 10,000 gold because my horse would collapse. Right? It's like 100 pounds, I guess. I think it comes out to.
Well, you could carry it on the horse, but then you couldn't ride the horse.
Right. So that's no good. So what I did was, and I think a lot of gamers did this, they converted all their gold to gems.
Yes, because gems are clicky, but they go into a pouch pretty easily.
Yeah, and it could be humongously, what is it? Expensive.
Yes.
They could be worth a lot of gold pieces. So that's what we did. That's what I did. And I think that was fun for us, and we could buy anything we wanted. I mean, to a point where we were like the super rich right now. Like, oh, we'll fly first class. We don't even worry about how much it costs, or we buy stuff because we just like it. We don't even look at the price. In fact, I don't know. Supposedly at like Beverly Hills, they don't even have prices on stuff, or Rodeo Drive, right? They don't have prices. If you have to ask, you can't afford it, kind of thing. So.
I'm incredulous on that one. I'm not sure.
I'm sure that I've heard that. I don't know if it's true.
I have a totally different experience with.
Oh, you've been to Rodeo Drive?
No.
I have a totally different experience with my friends who are super rich. Okay, so
that's not what I was going to say.
So I have some notes down here, and I said the ultimate thing is that the D&D system, I don't think tries to be realistic.
Right. Well, it's a fantastical game.
Right.
If they wanted to be realistic, they would go with more of a, and because Saul told me about this topic, I was thinking about it, and if you think about itinerant kingships, which I'm sure everybody does.
Oh yeah, it's at the top of the list. Okay, first you have to define the term, because some people may not know what itinerant kingship is.
In the Dark Ages and early Middle Ages,
which is what period for some people who don't know what that is.
Using my fingers as
air
quotes
quotes
there.
Yeah.
Between 500 and probably 1100.
So for a long period of time.
For a long period of time, the German kings were itinerant.
Which means
they went
they're
from
homeless?
place to place. No, they had a palace.
Okay.
Or they may not have. But they went from place to place, and they they established lords throughout the lands, right? Either
Okay.
churches with the bishops, right? And or whatever kind of person you want to call him. It was probably a bishop. They also had actual lords who owed them stuff. So what they did is they gave these people the land to protect, and I'm using air quotes again. Sorry, you can't see me.
Yes. No. Works well in
And then they were
podcasting.
itinerant, so what they did was they went around their land throughout the year to make sure that everybody was not gonna there weren't gonna be any uprisings, and to settle disputes, and to make sure when they were gonna go to war that all the people gave them the amount of soldiers they needed. So that's a different kind of economy, right? That's the actual medieval economy, the idea that you're bartering or you're doing different things. So when the king comes, well, one of the ways that you take care of them is you feed them and their whole retinue of people, their
Right.
soldiers, and their whole court comes with them.
Huh.
So that was the way that the king took. Saul's eyes are glazing over.
No,
Sorry.
no, no.
That was the way that the king made sure that his nobles didn't get too rich, and also that he had power over them, and he was reminding them as he went along that he was still there, right? That they're the reason why he's the reason why they're holding this land and becoming rich and powerful.
right.
But at the same time, instead of taxes, and he might have actually asked for taxes, not necessarily monetary taxes, but soldiers and food and all that kind of stuff to go with him
Goods,
when he needed
I
to
guess.
fight. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was more of the kind of economy there was, and there were at that time, is more of a barter economy. So you went to the market. People, there was obviously money around because the Romans had been there.
Right. Right. Of course,
So
they
there
had
were
the-
coins
yes,
and stuff.
Yes.
So, but mostly probably the church and maybe. I'm gonna say there weren't a lot of coins at that particular time period because they may not have been minting them at
So
that
when
time
did the
period.
Romans retreat out of that area? I mean, the reason
The Romans didn't retreat out of the area. The Arlic, I think his name was Arlic.
Arlic.
He came in and he sacked Rome in 410, I believe it was.
Oh, that's good.
And
That's right.
after that, basically they were cut off. The people in the provinces, Gaul and whoever
Britain,
was,
even right?
yeah, all the way from Germany, from Italy to France. There were all kinds of client kings that became actual kings.
Right, because there was no more.
Or they didn't
no more-
necessarily call themselves kings.
But there,
But the church was still there, and the Roman aristocracy was still out there. So they became the leaders of the towns and stuff like that. And then you made deals with the warlords or whoever was in charge at the particular time.
So-
And they became the itinerant kings.
oh, so there was okay.
This is just a fast and loose history of what. So I was just talking to Saul about it because of the economy, right?
We should start a history podcast.
No.
a medieval history card.
No.
Well, the reason I asked Jolene this, and it's funny because I took a lot of ancient history classes, and Jolene didn't take as many as I did, but she centered on a lot of medieval stuff. And the thing that kept me, and I think I might have mentioned this before, the thing that kept me away from medieval stuff, because the only reason I took ancient history was because of D&D, right? My RPG fascination. And truly it was interesting, for me, it was an interesting period of history. I was a U.S. history major. I could actually make a point that Roman history has impacted the United States
Policy.
and government, or foundation of the government, some
Yes.
ideals, and how government or what laws and all that stuff make. So it is kind of turned into a history podcast. But so I remember going to San Jose State and I took Byzantine history, even though I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was a Babylonian history. That's how my intelligent question was. But it was fascinating because I had never heard that the eastern part of the Roman Empire had survived to the 1100s, right? 1100s AD, which I always thought that Rome was sacked in 412.
410.
410, and it ceased to exist. But meanwhile, the eastern part of the empire just was thriving, right? It was a collection of all these people who had art, who had mathematics, and they had architecture.
So the economy was different in the East because it was still the Roman economy with actual coins and
actual coins. So
Yeah.
it was a Silveris, whatever the coin was. I forget. It's been a long time since I've been in school. But anyway, so I kept taking classes in ancient history, and I really liked the teacher and the way he taught class. And so I took a lot of classes from him, but then Jolene took classes from this other professor, which I heard was extremely hard. and so I stayed away from them. I was kind of an easygoing kind of student, meandering student of history. Until they tell me, Saul, you really need to graduate and get out of here. That was for my master's, though. So they kicked me out of school after 7 years. Actually, 8 because I
You had to drop some classes.
Yeah. So they didn't really kick me out. This is what I'll tell you. In the CSU system, even though some of you may not even know what that is, the California State University system. If you go for your master's class, you just can't stay. There's no such thing.
You're
as
only allowed to be there for 7 years.
There's no professional student, right? I don't know about if there's a limitation for graduate students, for doctorate.
Doctorates you usually get from the UC
universities,
system.
right? But you can get a master's in different things in the CSU system. After 7 years,
your classes start to drop
the
off.
first grade classes that you took, they stop dropping off and they don't count toward your.
But you need those first classes to
Some
graduate.
Some of them. I didn't need them. A lot of them because they were like, Byzantine history, and I took like a 100W because I had transferred from political science. So anyway, I didn't take a lot of medieval history. So when I ask you questions, I really asking you questions and not like feeding you softball questions because I really don't remember because I didn't take those classes. So there's a big hole in my history.
And we're talking about currency and role playing games.
Yes.
So that's just my idea about. That idea comes into play for me when we play D&D, that bartering system and stuff. Because the guys that I play with always ask, what are we going to get paid? No matter what we're playing, right? And I'm like...
They're like mercenaries.
I go, well, that's no fun. So I like the other systems, like when the wealth system, where what we were playing Lord of the Rings. Which is called the One Ring. And I like the idea that it was just a wealth system, right? You were either wealthy, you have a level of wealth, yes. And that's basically your lifestyle.
Yes.
Shadowrun has something similar to, you have to make sure you keep up your lifestyle, whatever it is. So you have to make enough money,
right,
or new one to pay for it, right?
Okay, you're getting way ahead of me.
No, I'm just saying that there's different.
Oh yeah.
So I like the idea of a wealth system more than
the actual accounting 101.
Yeah, because it kind of makes mercenaries out of the players, right?
I had not thought of that, but you're right. So how do other systems deal with wealth, right? So we're talking about D&D. D&D deals with gold pieces, silver pieces, and then they threw in something like in AD&D called electrum pieces, which was a mix of something and something, and platinum pieces because people were getting really rich, right? And they needed something that was worth more than gold. Imagine that. I'm thinking of Traveler because it's the next game that I remember playing and it was created in 1977 or published in 77. So, but it's a science fiction game. So it eliminates gold pieces and dollars and comes up with credits.
Yes.
So credits is a really cool system because it was also picked up by Space Opera. Space Opera was published in 1980 and it uses the same
it's a sci-fi kind of
right. So a credit doesn't mean anything, right? But then again,
but you have a credit stick, and if you don't have enough credits on your credit stick, then you're not going to be able to do anything, right? So
to me, it was like a value of $1, right? The U.S. dollar. I'm sorry if you're listening from Denmark and other places, but I'm in the United States. The reason I mention you guys is because I know there's some people who listen from Denmark and other countries. So that's
and we
pretty
thank
cool.
you for that.
And thank you for listening. Yes, everybody who listens. So that's what I looked at it, and I remember reading through the book, Traveler and Space Opera, and saying, "Oh, credits! It kind of equates to $1. I understand." So blah blah blah. I wonder if it still equates to $1 with the
I doubt it.
Inflation. Yeah, it would be really cheap stuff. Okay, so Space Opera handles it differently, but it's basically you still have money.
Yeah.
You still have...
Well, credits are basically money, right? You're going to do the job for how many credits you're going to get.
Correct.
And stuff so that you can get gas or fuel for your spaceship.
Yes. I think Space Master, which was Iron Crown Enterprises, I used to call it ICE, ICE for short. That's what they used to call it. And I remember in the podcast, I called it ICE Iron Crown
Enterprises.
It's Enterprises. I called it Industries, which would have been ICI. So that didn't make sense, but I don't always.
That would have been icky.
Yeah. Okay. So, so I don't remember. I remember Mike, our friend Mike, was really into ICE system, and I don't know if he ran a game, but he had the books for Space Master and all those other stuff.
I was reading in that GURPs
GURPs.
that it's like a credit or a dollar. It's a dollar sign, right? But you apply whatever you want the currency to be.
Yeah, because
So if you want it to be
multi-genre
teeth, it could be teeth,
genre.
or like something.
Right. Well,
Birds. I don't know. I found that very interesting that
I collect birds.
you could apply it to whatever it was.
And Shadowrun, of course, is an early game when I used to play. It was new yen. They came up
Yes.
with a new currency, and so on. So I think those are systems that use a monetary money to reward the players with money.
And then you take that money,
And buy
especially in
stuff.
Shadowrun, and buy stuff.
Right. So you mentioned this other system called a wealth level.
Yes.
Which was in Liminal, and the One Ring is the one you mentioned.
Yes.
I think the only problem I see with not a problem, but what like in the One Ring has to do with I'm always going to be frugal. There's different levels, right? There's frugal, there's comfortable kind of, and then there's wealthy or whatever in the One Ring. So when my character is Marshall's another one. I don't know what Marshall means. I think it's better than frugal. And so you're not really poor, but you're just you're doing okay. And so the problem is that it seems like you can never get out of that. Or
It's more of a class system. And
ooh, you're such a classist, honey.
I am not.
So my problem, not a problem, but kind of my what is it? My
Your trepidation.
trepidation is a good word. The fault that I have is that it seems like you can never get out of that wealth level.
Well, if you put it into normal terms, you're either poor working class,
yeah,
or you're working class, lower middle class, upper middle class, depending on, and then rich or whatever you want to call it. Although they wouldn't call themselves rich.
yeah, nobody does.
We just call them posh. So
We do.
In reality, you don't. You grow up in a certain way, and you may move up one.
Right.
You may, if your parents didn't own a house, maybe you will own a house. Or
Right.
if your parents did own a house, maybe you won't own a house, and you'll be considered.
Well, yeah, it's a working class, right? There's working class people who work and own a home, like my parents.
Technically, if you own a home, you're middle class. Not in the United States, but anymore. But that's the definition of.
Right. And then, but there's some people who have very good jobs who rent their whole life.
Yes.
I think I hate to refer to
Please.
TV shows. But
Don't.
for friends, right? Friends.
Yeah.
They were talking about on the show that some of them after a while got good jobs. First they're struggling, right?
Yeah.
And then they almost all of them get good jobs, and they're doing, except for Ross, right? He has a good job at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, but they're all renting in
New York.
Manhattan, aren't they?
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people find fault with that because they say, well, apartment in New York.
It was
Rent control?
Yeah. No, it was like an apartment that her grandmother had, so that's how she afforded it. She was in the same apartment that her grandmother had.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why she didn't have to pay as much rent, and that happens a lot in New York. So.
Okay. Yeah. I know there's rent control in San Francisco and stuff, but I don't know if it is like that in New York. So the idea of renting and not owning a home is not a status of middle class. Though toward the end of the show, when people were starting hooking up and having children and stuff, they were talking about buying a house somewhere else.
Long Island.
Long Island, huh? I guess.
Both of us are from California, so I only know what I've read and the people that I've talked to about New York, Manhattan, Long Island, whereas Saul probably...
I have completely no clue.
So when he says these places, he looks surprised to me. So I'm just letting you know.
Well, okay.
It's if you grew up in California, that's pretty much all you've ever been in.
Yes.
Other places it's like reading books, right? You haven't been there, so you don't really know what it's like.
You come up with your own idea of what it looks like.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even close to reality. It's like this big...
Saul's ideas are often totally off the mark. It's
like clay, right? They're kind of malleable. Nice soft clay, not the hard one that you forgot about that your son threw underneath the couch and haven't seen in 7 years. But that hard clay. But it's like it can change and stuff like that. Or I have no clue what it looks like. Honestly, and it's not only my problem, and I consider it a problem. people in the United States have terrible geography skills, right?
Not all people.
Well, a lot of people in the
Yes.
United States, because they always see these comedians, right? Their shows, right? Jimmy Fallon, all this stuff. They do these shows on how they have a map of the world. The United States goes, they go, point to a certain place, and I was really shocked. There was one say, it goes, I forget what it was, but they couldn't find it. People go, "Where's the United States?" They couldn't find the United States
On a map?
Yeah, on a map, on a world
Of
map,
the world?
right?
Okay.
And then they go, I think what weird questions are like, and they go, where is China or Russia? And they point to China, and then where's Mexico? And they point to, like, I don't know, maybe they were goofing off. I don't know. And they
Anyway,
point to Africa. So I don't know. But anyway, Americans are known for having terrible geography knowledge, and I'm sort of like that. I mean, I know that New York's on the East Coast. That's pretty good.
there's, yes, anyway.
And there's boroughs and all
Yes,
that,
yes,
even
we
though
won't
I
go
don't
into
know
it.
the boroughs and all that.
Let's not go into it.
So back to money. Okay, so the wealth level attribute, or the way of dealing with wealth without money and just giving you a wealth thing, is pretty cool.
It makes it a little bit easier not to have to. Well, it depends on the kind of GM you have, though.
That's true. And players.
Penny pinching GMs, right? Or GMs who want to make sure that everything you have, you've paid for. And a lot of times when you're playing Shadowrun and stuff like that, that is an important thing, right? Because you're in a not post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
You're in a really hard place, right? If you don't have the money, they're going to not let you go get back into your apartment.
Right.
Or you're going to have to go and live in the slum area.
You live in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you do jobs to make sure you keep up your lifestyle, right?
Correct.
So when the difference between that and just a wealth system, like, I like the wealth system and the idea that I don't have to keep track of how much money I have on my piece of paper, because sometimes I forget to write it down. But I've learned with the boys, you have to write everything down so you can make sure that everybody is honest about how much money they have, right? Which is another thing, and I don't like having to be the police of, oh, you spent $3,000 gold pieces on that, so how do you still have that, right? Oh, I forgot to mark it down.
I totally agree with you. I was looking at, but Shadowrun, you have to keep track of money.
I know.
Because money is a big deal. Because I forget who it was. Somebody in the group was like, I could care less about karma because that doesn't do me any good. And I'm like, what? And he was talking about, I think it might have been our son. He was talking about money, because money is very important to him, because that's how you get better.
How you can augment yourself.
Because everything costs money. And it costs
an airplane.
And the cybernetic arms and thermal plating and all this weird stuff. And all that, it takes the hundreds of thousands of new yen.
Yeah.
Or tens of thousands at least. And you're always getting better, right? So the better stuff costs more. So where you, as a sorceress in that game, you could care less really about how much money you make, because as long as you're comfortable, you're fine.
I was very low level on the money scale, so.
Right, but you're right. But the One Ring, like you said, it was a lot different. It was funny because I was from frugal or martial, whatever that means. I can barely live. And Shannon was being really, the GM was being really.
Well, you said you had a war horse or something, and
I tried to get a war horse, and he wouldn't let me
because of your status.
Right. I could have stolen it. I could have said I stole the war horse.
That would have given you some shadow, wouldn't it?
It might have been, but what the hell?
Yeah,
I don't care.
So, but it is if you're in the One Ring world, that's an important thing too,
yes.
Right? Your status of, because it kind of lets you know, like, are you going to be able to afford staying at the Prancing Pony?
Right.
How are you just going to go to your family's house or find somebody that is like you that is going to help
somebody to house you?
Yeah.
Well, but the problem is that because I was from Rohan, I was a complete stranger, and we were playing in Bree, and Bree landers don't trust outsiders, right?
That's xenophobia. That's the way that
I understand. No, I'm not arguing that. But there was no alternative for me to stay at somebody's house. I had to stay at a Prancing Pony. Or I guess they could have stuck me in the stables, which I wouldn't have been real happy about. But I'm like horses, so what the hell? I would have been okay. Since I'm from Rohan. I like horses. So what also is in the mix with the One Ring is that there's treasure. And we've discussed this in the group because we've been playing the One Ring for about 3 years now. I guess, 3 years.
Not me. I've only played it once.
Yeah. Once? Is that all? Oh wow! So there's this thing called
No,
treasures.
twice. I'm sorry.
We have treasure. They give you during the adventures and stuff. You can find treasure, whatever that is, and it's this really abstract thing, right? It could be a treasure is something that could be gold. It could be an ancient artifact or a piece of an ancient artifact.
And does the treasure then raise your status?
No.
But it gives you money to spend.
Well, and I guess if you were to find Smog's or get Smog's
Gold stash?
hoard,
Yeah.
it might raise your status. But we're talking about little things that you find out in the wild or while adventuring. And unlike D&D, monsters don't just like you kill the monster, it falls on the ground, and bags of gold spill on the ground. You collect it all. That doesn't happen in
That's
the
one of the
Ring.
things I hate about, not hate, but it's one of the things that really bothers me every time I play with the boys.
The looting?
The teenage, you kill it and then you got to go through its pockets, and I'm like going, that's so distasteful to me. The going through the pockets.
I should put crappy stuff in the pockets.
You do sometimes, like there's not. You only got like 4 bent swords. They were really badly constructed, stuff like that, right?
Oh yeah, there's that. But I should put like something like, you find his handkerchief that he blew his nose in.
That's gross.
That'd be cool, right?
No,
that would be cool. That's what they
That's
deserve.
why I would never go through pockets.
That's what I would never go through pockets. But in the medieval world, maybe there's worse things.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying about the One Ring is that you're not so enamored with the wealth system because you don't get to move up.
Right.
You don't get some extra money so that you can stay at the Pouncing Pony.
Yes, you can if you have treasure. Okay. So like, and this is how abstract the treasure is, right? It says 1 treasure is enough to keep you at a certain level. I think it's not frugal, it's not martial. I forget. Comfortable for 3 months. Well, that's like being able to stay at a nice or a decent tavern for 3 months and eat. I'm like, wow. Okay, that's like, how much more
so abstract
can you get, right? Keep it at that level. But then once the treasure runs out, you're back to whatever you were before, which I guess is sort of realistic. That once you run out of money, you're back on the street.
And how does Liminal do it? You said they did it.
Same thing. They do a wealth level, but there's no money. There's absolutely no ching 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 ching. I don't give you dollars and stuff like that.
I kind of like that idea because it makes a little more sense than having to calculate how much money you have, and because you're traveling, right? Well, in Liminal, you're traveling, but you're in the real world, so that would be easy. You'd look it up on your phone, but but the idea of having to keep a running tally and know how many gold pieces you have in your bag or how much money you're carrying with you is always a little bit harder to deal with than just the idea of knowing that you are wealthy, right? So you can afford to stay at a hotel. Or Saul always says when we're in D&D, if you're going to stay here you can stay here for 3 silver pieces per person. That'll give you 3 days or something. And everybody goes, okay, because we have silver pieces, no big deal.
You guys are loaded.
And you know that you're going to be able to we've converted everything to gems. You're going to be able to afford it, and you're safe for those. Well, relatively safe because. You never know in D&D.
I think I've attacked in your hotel or your
when you're asleep.
tavern. Yeah.
The idea that you're wealthy, yes, of course I can pay for the inn for the night and pay for the dinner for the people.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about. So when I played the One Ring, that was one of the first things I picked was I was a wealthy gentleman. I go, I might as well. Why would I want to pick being poor? Because this is a game. I'm not going to pick that.
Well, you're a wealthy hobbit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the Shire. I didn't care about that. I mean, I didn't care about the wealth level, but it was kind of a pain in the butt when I came into to breed.
So it is something you should care about.
Yeah, it is obviously. I don't know. I have a ton of notes, and I don't think we've covered any of it. But but I do like the alternatives to wealth. Like I'm going to rattle off some systems. So we talked about the One Ring. SpyCraft, which is a 3.0 SpyCraft spy game.
Got it.
Game. They have they kind of deal away with wealth. They just say gear. This is the kind of gear you can afford to try to make it faster to make a character and stuff and equip your character. I don't know if it works. I don't think I've actually ever ran a spacecraft game. SpyCraft, I'm sorry. So a lot of games now deal with these wealth, cloudy, amorphous, non-specific wealth levels, and I think that's pretty cool because I didn't think about it until you were talking about gold and picking up bags of gold and looting the bodies. Is that it makes you? It doesn't push that motor hobo thing, right? That you're killing things to take their stuff. If you have just a wealth level, because it's not going to change, and so no matter how much wealth you acquire, usually, you're not going to change levels, or it's not going to make it. That's not what the game is about.
Right. Instead of having to do the money counting and figuring out if you're going to be able to do stuff, it's just you either are or you aren't. And maybe you're going to do it anyway because that's the character you're playing. It makes more role playing less, I don't know, what do you want to call it?
Right. So I was thinking, what are the pros and cons of each, right? So the pros and cons for having a money system is that some people just like keeping track of stuff. They're just like that running tally of how much money they have, and they like subtracting and playing. Accounting 101. GMs, they could care less, right? Boom. I'm just gonna give you gold. You deal with it. I could care less.
Right.
It's easy. The cons is murder hoboism, I guess.
Well, it's less role playing, more trying to figure out what you can do.
Right. What are the cons do you have against it? Because I don't.
Well, it makes it a lot harder to make a character if you have to go down and figure out what equipment you can buy, like any of the role playing games, Traveler and stuff like that. Traveler, I got out of the army and I rolled lousy or on the table of how much money you get, and then I was poor from there on out. I had a crappy character because of it.
Well, you can make money in Traveler. That's the whole
I
deal.
didn't manage to do that.
Well, I don't know. You're a terrible spacer. So accounting, I think the only con is just like people who like accounting stuff, there's people who don't. So they're like, oh, I don't know how much money I have. What was it? How much money did we get the last time? There's that 5-minute. Well, okay.
I have written down 3,000, but I don't know what you got.
Get that? Hey, when did we get that much money? When did? How many shares of that did I get?
And who's holding all this money?
Yeah, where is this? Yeah, where is this bank that's holding all this money? So that as a pro, as a con. So wealth levels, I think it does away with all that stuff. I think that's a good thing. I think it's more role player-ish in a certain sense that
it takes away that part of something you have to worry about and lets you focus on whatever you're role playing, right?
Correct. And I think that's why a lot of newer games that are less about killing monsters, taking their stuff, they use that wealth level. Like One Ring, it's not about going out and killing orcs. It's about trying to save the world. Liminal, the main focus is not about acquiring wealth. It's about solving mysteries and helping people who have problems with the supernatural, right? So
I just want to throw out that this could be that gamers have evolved from the kids that were playing, and that was a big part of it.
Yes.
Now they're a lot older and may not have to worry so much about the money aspect.
I had not thought of that. You're right.
I mean, some people might still, but I think a little bit of poshness has come into it.
Well, I think you're right, because as a little kid, you don't have any money, right? And you dream about money. Well, you don't dream about. You dream about buying stuff, right? Being able to afford. First, it's the candy bar. Maybe it's a toy, a game, a Nintendo.
Now that my son has worked for a few weeks in the summer,
you're talking about buying a car.
No, he wants to upgrade his computer.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. Then he wants to buy a car
with his own money,
right?
Not what mom is going to find on sale.
Right. Or his dad finds stuff on sale or cheap. So acquiring wealth is a big deal for kids, right?
Level characters, same thing, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's the thing. So when you're a middle class, or not middle class, when you're middle aged, if you're above 30, I'm going to guess 25 maybe, but 30, yeah, you don't care about money. You can afford stuff.
Well,
you can afford stuff usually, you may worry about money, but you're like, oh my God, I don't know. Hopefully you're not in the sense that you worry about putting food on the table, but you're comfortable enough that your material needs are met and you can afford
and it may not be the players, it could be the people who are writing the games, is what I was saying.
That's true. Acquiring wealth isn't like a big deal in the game anymore, because you're beyond that. You'd rather deal with solving mysteries and dealing with the quests.
Getting down to the nitty gritty of the actual role playing.
For me, I'm just gonna throw this out. Probably my favorite system is kind of like a combination, kind of like the One Ring. You have this wealth level, but at the same time, you can acquire a little bit of treasure here and there, and it's abstract, and you could just it could afford a comfortable level of living for 3 months.
I think that if you acquire enough treasure, you should be able to move up a wealth level.
Well, I think that's done during role play, so I think that's what you're talking about, and I think that's the way it should go.
Right.
Right. I think there's some games like I'm gonna throw this out like GURPs where you actually buy your wealth level.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think you could buy being wealthy. Well, it's like a what is it? Instead of a hindrance, it's a perk or whatever they call it. I forget what they call it. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But a lot of games do that, like where you have a point buy system. You can buy your wealth. I don't know. Does
Shadowrun does that?
Does Shadowrun do that?
Because you get to spend when you're making your character, which is a very arduous process. You get to choose your wealth level, but you have it comes with a cost. You choose if you choose a really high wealth level, then that's going to take away some of the other stuff that you could choose, right?
Right.
But it does, like Augustine says, always choose the most because then you can augment yourself and do all the stuff.
Unless you're a mage and augment yourself
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it does away with all your powers.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Monetary system. A monetary system or wealth level in RPGs is now kind of really diverse. There's different levels, literally, of how
role-playing game writers
deal with the situation. And I think, like I said,
it's evolved and changed.
It's evolved and changed for the better, I think.
There you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.